Pesachim Daf Yud Bet. Fascinating topic about margins of error in telling time. We take it for granted today that we have watches, and you can say that candle lighting is at 6:12 and stop eating chametz at 10:02, and everyone knows exactly when that is. But before modern times, people just had to guess around what time it was. So that's related to Pesach, and it's also related to testimony in general. So it's related to Pesach because we had a machloket in the Mishnah. Rabbi Meir said you can eat all during the fifth hour. So again, they're counting time as given a typical day of 12 hours, even though actually it will stretch or shrink to between 11 and 13, 14 hours of winter and summer. But given a typical day, from sunrise at 6 a.m. till 7 is the first hour, 7 to 8 is the second hour, and so on. So that means noon till 1 p.m. is the seventh hour. So that's how they divided the day into those hours. So during the fifth hour, which means from 10 till 11 a.m., you're allowed to eat. And then the beginning of the sixth, you would burn the chametz. According to Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehudah said, no, you got to eat the fourth hour. The fifth hour, you can use it, but you can't eat it. It's just waiting period. And then he agrees you burn it in the sixth. And then we saw another opinion of Raban Gamaliel that just says you can eat terumah during the fifth hour, otherwise was the same. And now you see they're all adding to the time because from the Torah, the time is noon. At noon, you have to stop eating and get rid of all your chametz. But everyone's adding a little bit more time. And so the basic reason is because they couldn't tell exactly when noon was. So you got to add some more time, add a little bit more time, add 1 hour, add 2 hours. So we're going to get back to that. But first, we're going to have Johnny?
Was it all done by the sun?
Exactly, by the sun. Yeah. Yeah, so that's what we're going to see. Noontime, you can tell, right? Before noon and afternoon. You can tell before sunrise and after sunrise. Those were clear markers. But between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m., it's very hard to tell. Okay, now, so we're going to go into witness testimony. This could be testimony that people saw the moon, which would be at night, or that, there was a murder or a thief, and anytime you need testimony, and you bring the two witnesses and ask them, okay, what time did it happen? They have to tell you what time. So what if they're off a little? What if one says 10:30, one says 10:32? Do we throw them out? How big is the margin of error that is permitted when we take their testimony? All right, already yesterday we saw that Mishnah. To remember, Rabbi Meir says they can be off by 1 hour. If one witness says it happened during the second hour of the day, and the second witness said that the murder happened in the third hour of the day, it's okay. We accept them because they're off for an hour, but they still could mean the same thing. But not more than that. So Rabbi Meir is pretty strict regarding that accepting testimony. Rabbi Yehudah, however, says is more lenient. He's more lenient on accepting the testimony. That's not good for the defendant, right? And he says you can allow a 2 hour difference. Even one says 3, one says 5, that's okay. But not between 5 and 7, because one is before noon and one is after noon. So that 2 hour difference before and after noon, we do not allow. Okay, good. Now, since we have these two opinions, we're going to have 3 interpretations of those 2 Tanaim. 2 by Abaye and 1 and Rava. It's good to make it clear here in the chart, and then we'll see it inside. When we see this margin of difference with the Rabbi Meir, and he says one says 2 is okay, one says 3 is okay. Well, how much is the actual margin of difference? According to the first opinion of Abaye, it's actually 0, because it could be that it happened at the end of the second hour, which is the same as the beginning of the third hour. So actually, they agree on the time. One's just calling it the very end, one's calling it the very beginning. The second version of Abaye says basically the same thing, except he allows for 2 minutes. So one says it happened at 9:59, and the other one says it's 10:01, right? So that's just a 2-minute margin of difference, and that is acceptable. But that's all that acceptable, right? In any other case, they would have to give the exact time. According to the Rabbi Yehudah, in Abaye's version, he allows 30 minutes. Imagine if it's right in the middle, and so at 10:30, and so a margin of difference of 30 minutes can bring it before to the third hour or later to the fifth hour. According to Abaye the second, Second version of Abaye, it's going to be an hour and 2 minutes. Okay, we'll show all this in detail, and then we're going to have the opinion of Rava, according to whom Rabbi Meir allows maximum almost 2 hours, and Rabbi Yehudah allows the maximum almost 3 hours. All right, so let's see how they deal with this, and then we're going to bring this all the way back to Chametz at some point. So here we are. Amar Abaye, lecheshetimsad lomar l'divrei Rabbi Meir, en adam to'eh velo kilum. The Rabbi Yehudah, Adam Toeh Hasi Sha'a. So if you look into the matter and analyze their two opinions, although they're giving wide ranges of hours, second hour and third hour, if you want to analyze more precisely, according to the Rabbi Meir, a person is expected to know the exact time. There is zero margin of error. According to the Rabbi Yehudah, we allow only a 30-minute margin of error. How does that work? So, according to the Rabbi Meir, who doesn't allow anything, the murder occurred at the end of the second hour, beginning of the third hour. And so, one witness said the second hour, and he meant by that the end of the second hour. He meant the beginning of the third. So here's the red hours where the incident happened, and so this can be interpreted as the end of the second or the third or the beginning of the third. So therefore, if one says second, one says third, we accept it. That would mean that, let's say there was another case where they said, one said it happened, maybe let's say they had watches, and one said at 2:30 and one said 2:32, we wouldn't accept them, right? They only accept them here because of the possibility that they're talking about the same exact minute. And how about for the Rabbi Yehudah? So let's say the murder happened in the middle of the fourth hour over here. And so now, since we allow for a 30-minute margin of error, so it could be that it happened in the middle of the fourth. He thought it was the end of the third. So that's why he said the third hour. And the next witness comes, and he's also off by a half hour, but the other way. And so he thinks it's the beginning of the fifth, and he says the fifth. So you see that this opinion is minimizing, we're finding the least amount that they could be off by, and so he's going to be the most strict in give the smallest margin of error. Okay, that's the first version of Abaye. The second version of Abaye is very similar, except that he's not going to include a zero. He has to be, it has to be the time period has to be somewhere within the second hour, within the third hour, and so he has to allow a little bit more time. כשתמסר לו על דברי רבי מאיר, אדם טועה משהו. דברי רבי יהודה, אדם טועה שעה ומשהו. לדברי רבי מאיר, אדם טועה משהו, מעשה כי הווה, או בסוף שתיים הווה, או בתחילת שלוש. ואחד מיני הוא טועה משהו. So he says, if you look into the matter, really Rabbi Meir allows for a couple of minutes, a short time. And so that way, the event could have happened at the end of the second hour, and then that's why the first witness said, it was the second hour, and the other witness made a mistake of a couple of minutes, and he said it's the third hour, and so it's within 2-3 minutes. So that's acceptable, but no, he wouldn't allow any more than that. And for the Rabbi Yehudah, the Rabbi Yehudah allows an hour and a couple of minutes and a little bit more. The Rabbi Yehudah, Adam to'eh sha'a u'mashehu. We allow for an hour and a little. Ma'aseh ki haba o besof shalosh o betchilat hamesh. And so the event that happened, let's say it happened at the end of the third hour. So we allow for a person to be off by an hour and a couple of minutes. And so he might think it's the fifth hour. And that's what he said, the fifth hour. And the other one said it's the third hour. And that's okay. It seems that according to in this version, we want at least one of the witnesses to actually say the correct hour, because in the previous version, it was in the middle of the fourth, and then one said 3 and one said 5, but neither of them are correct because it didn't happen in the fourth. So this one accounts for one of them actually being accurate, and the other one can be off by an hour and change. And the other one is off by an hour and change. All right, good. So that's all the first the opinion of Rava. And we have a question on this. Azal Rav Huna bered Rav Yehudah, Amara l'shmateta kamed Rava. So this statement that was said by Abaye, the rabbi came and said it in front of Rava. Amar, Umay ilu daikinan behane sahade, dehai dekamar shalosh bitchilat shalosh, v'hai dekamar chamesh besof chamesh, v'avya edut mucheshet, v'la katlinan, v'ana nekum beniktil mesifeka, v'rachamana amar, v'shaftu ha'eda, v'itzilu ha'eda. Rava has a very important question here. His question is as follows: we all know that we try to minimize giving capital punishment because the pasuk says that the congregation will judge and the congregation will save. In other words, we should always, as judges, try to go towards leniency because we don't want to apply the death penalty when it's not warranted. So we're going to look for every possibility to find innocence. So in this case, where someone said 2 and 3. Something like this. And now, let's say one says second hour, one says the third hour. Let's say we would do more investigation, and we would find out that the first witness, he thought it was the beginning of the first hour, and the second witness actually had in mind the end of the third hour. So they're actually very far apart. And so Rabbi Meir only allows for a couple of minutes to be the margin of error. So according to him, they really should be false witnesses, right? Because they're more than a couple of minutes. And yet you're going to accept them because the Mishnah says, if one says the second hour, one says the third hour, we accept them. So now we're going to accept the witnesses and we're going to kill this person, even though it's beyond the margin of error. So he says this is not a good way to think of it. We shouldn't calculate the minimum amount that's allowed, but rather we should look for the maximum amount. And that's exactly what Rava is going to do. So here is now Rava's opinion. Ela amar Rava. L'divrei Rabbi Meir adam to'eh shete sha'ot chaser mashehu. The divrei Rabbi Yehudah adam to'eh shalosh sha'ot chaser mashehu. In fact, according to Rabbi Meir, when he says they can be 1 hour off, one says second hour, one says third hour, and we accept them, he's actually allowing up to almost 2 hours, 2 hours less a little bit. And Rabbi Yehudah is allowing 2 hours and 58 minutes. How so? לדבר רבי מאיר אדם טועה שתי שעות חסר משהו, מעשה כי הווה או בתחילת שתיים או בסוף שתיים. ואחד מנה קטעה שתי שעות חסר משהו. What's the maximum that they could be off? Well, if the incident happened here and the first witness saw it and he meant the beginning of the second hour, and the other one could have thought of it as the end of the third hour, and yet we still accept them in this case. So this is the maximum margin of error that we will allow. And then we could apply that to other cases too, when it doesn't fall out quite like this. So therefore, and now that way, if this actually happened and witnesses came, we would accept them, and we should accept them and, give capital punishment because that is within the proper margin of error. It's under 2 hours. Good. And that answers his question. לדברי רבי יהודה, אדם טועה 3 שעות חסר משהו, מעשה כי הווה או בתחילת 3 או בסוף 5. ואחד מנהו קטעה 3 שעות חסר משהו. And according to Rava, within Abaye, the event could have happened here in the beginning of the third hour. And so one witness will say the third hour. And since his margin of error is up to 3 hours, so it could be that the second witness said fifth hour. And that would be that the full margin of error. So that is the maximum margin of error, and then that would be still acceptable. Okay, good. So now that we have all the opinions, we have this chart in mind. Before we get to chametz, we're going to ask another question, which is how can they be invalidated as edim zomemin? Edim zomemin means that the person said, I saw a murder in the third hour, and then someone else, 2 other witnesses come and say, you were with us in the baseball game in Chicago, and so you could not have seen the murder in New York at that time, right? And therefore, we throw out, not only do we throw out their testimony, we actually give those first set of witnesses capital punishment for trying to kill someone. So now, in order to do that, you have to know when it happened, and so these margins of error can make things complicated, because if you allow a large margin of error, then someone says, "Oh, you with us in the baseball game at in the third hour." That's when you said the murder was. He can come and say, "Oh no, I was off by an hour, right? The murder was really the next hour." And so, how can you ever invalidate the witnesses based on the time period? Okay, that's what we're going to get to. Let's see the sources first. Here, okay. Vavinan ba. Here, no, here, okay. Tenan, we have a Mishnah in Masechet Sanhedrin. Whenever witnesses would come, see, what's the benefit of having two witnesses over one is that you can separate them into different rooms, and we do an investigation, and their testimony has to match up. If they contradict each other on anything, then we throw them out. So there are 7 basic fundamental questions that we ask all witnesses. In what Shemitah cycle during the Jubilee? Jubilee is 49 years, so there's 7 Shemitah cycles. So which one of is it the second, the third? Which one of those cycles? And within that, Be'ez Shana, which year within the 7-year cycle? Is it what the Shemitah year, the year after, the second year after? Within that year, Be'ez Chodesh, what month? Bekama Chodesh, what date of the month? Be'ez Yom, what day of the week? Be'ez Sha'ah, what time, what hour? Be'ez Makom, and where was it? Okay, so basically when and and where. V'tanya, ma ben chakirot b'dikot. Besides those 7 basic things about settings, we ask them another set of optional questions, extra questions, called b'dikot. And that b'dikot might be, what was the perpetrator wearing? What color were his shoes? How about the murder victim, right? What color hair did he have? And so on. So all other details that are not essential to the time and place. But you still might want to ask them. If they contradict those, then also you would throw out the testimony. So what's the essential difference? If you ask one of the basic 7 and one says, I don't know, I don't remember, I don't know where it was, or I don't remember when it was, then we throw it out. You have to know where and when the event took place. The reason is because we have to, that makes him accountable, so that someone else comes and says, oh, you were with us. So therefore you have to say the time and place. And if they say I don't remember, they throw them out. Whereas regarding the other things, if you say what color was the sweater, and one says I don't remember what color it was, if they both say we don't remember what color his sweater was, it wasn't distinguishable, and so that's okay, we accept it. As long as they don't answer and contradict, they can say we don't know. Okay, that is the Mishnah. When we analyzed that Mishnah, we wondered further, what is furthermore is the difference between them? Why is it so important that they get the exact day and time and place right? So that it would be refutable, right? If it's a testimony that cannot be tested, that cannot be invalidated, then we can't use it either, right? Like in science, right? If you have a thesis that is not verifiable, that is not falsifiable, right? If you have something that's not falsifiable, something you can't test, you can't falsify, then you can't accept it as a theory either, right? Because no way to test it. So therefore, that's the reason why we need to know what exact time it was, because if it could not be undone, contradicted by edim zomemin or edim mizimim, then it's no good. So bedikot edut she'ata yachol azimahi. Whereas the other questions regarding the what color his sweater was, so that doesn't affect the falsifiability of the testimony, and that's why that's not important. That's not as important. All right. Why do we need to say all this? For now, we're going to bring it back. If you're going to say that a person, the margin of error can be 2 hours up to 3 hours, then how is this going to work? Then even if you ask the person the hour and he says the murder happened in the 3rd hour, and then other second set of witnesses says you were with us in the ball game during the 3rd hour, and we said, oh, 3rd hour, we were off a little, right? So we meant it was really the fourth hour, it was really the fifth hour. So then you can never pin them down because they'd be slippery. Okay, so that is the question. How can we allow such a margin of error? How can we ever render the testimony false? The answer is in fact, we have to allow for them that entire time period. So therefore, the edim zomemin mizimin, when they come, they have to say there was this in the ball game, and it was a very long. It was very long. They went extra innings, and it was a 3-hour game, right? And it lasted during the second, third, and fourth hour. So then, if they just say the third hour, right, and they're off, and they can be off by one, we have to make sure that they could not have been there during the entire window of error. Okay, so that makes a little bit harder to contradict their testimony, but that's what you would have to do because they could say that. All right. So now applying this to the two opinions, according to the Rabbi Meir, this is all according to Rava, the maximum one. If we would have to give them from the beginning of the first hour until the end of the fifth hour. In other words, if one witness came and said it happened in the third hour, right? So according to Rava, that's 2 hours, right? Let's make sure that according to Rava, according to the Meir, you have a 2-hour window in both directions. So that would mean that if one witness says it was the third hour, he might be off all the way up to the end of the fifth hour, and as early as the beginning of the first hour, right? And so we would have to allow all that time. And truth is that we might have to give them even more, like the other witness. Let's say the other one witness says third hour, the other witness says second hour. So that second witness should get a window of time till the end of the fourth hour, and 2 hours earlier, which would be an hour before sunrise. Now, we don't go that far because everybody knows when sunrise is. So that's a cutoff point, no matter what, right? If he says earlier than that, then it's no good. So that's what we'd have to do. We'd have to, that's an overlapping time. One witness would have to be from the second to the fifth, and the other were from sunrise till the fourth. And so the second set of witnesses would have to say, at least one of the witnesses was with us during that entire 5-hour period. And that's the only way they could be an ed zomem. Good. That's the first. And then applying for that to Rabbi Yehudah is even more. Rabbi Yehudah even on the mitchilat sha'a rishona ad sof shishit. You'd give him from the beginning of the first hour until the end of the sixth hour. In other words, actually the entire morning, because if he said in the fourth hour, you need to give him actually. Even let's say at the beginning of the third hour, you give him 3 hours ahead and 3 hours back, but this sunrise is a cutoff point. Another cutoff point is going to be midday, right? That's what we're about to say. About sof shishit. Really, we should give the one that said third hour, we should give him even an hour earlier, but we don't. People know when sunrise is. But everybody knows if he says it was in the fifth hour, so then you only give him the sixth hour. That's it, because everybody knows that after that time, then the sun moves to the western hemisphere, and so you don't have to. No one will get confused regarding that. All right, so now that concludes our discussion of testimony itself, and now we're going to apply it to the question about chametz. And so here's the question. According to Abaye, who says people know exactly, the maximum is 30 minutes or an hour is the maximum according to Abaye's second interpretation. And so since people are pretty exact on time, why do we need to add so much time before the prohibition of chametz? Chametz is prohibited at noon, right? So according to the Rabbi Meir of this box, just make it prohibited at noon itself, or 2 minutes before, or 30 minutes before, right? But why, or an hour before? But Rabbi Meir adds an hour before, and Rabbi Yehudah makes it prohibited 2 hours before. But all you need is this much, because people know what time it is. Our answer is going to be that witnesses are more vigilant than the masses of people, because everybody's eating chametz. We're going to ask about the opposite direction. Don't you need to add more time for error? People don't know the time at all, and people can be off by 2 hours or even by 3 hours. So for the Rabbi Meir, you should really add 2 hours, and for the Rabbi Yehudah, you should add 3 hours right before noon that you should stop eating chametz. But he only adds 2 hours. So what's the reason for that? We're going to see three basic answers, and then some subdivisions under that answer. All right, so let's start with the questions on Abaye. Tenan, we're recording our Mishnah in case we forgot it. Tenan, Rabbi Meir omer ochlin kol chamesh v'sorfin betchilat shesh. We eat during the 5th hour and then we burn it at 11:01 a.m. Rabbi Yehudah omer ochlin kol arba v'tolin kol chamesh v'sorfin betchilat shesh. He says you can eat it until 10 a.m., right? 2 hours before, but then you wait from 10 to 11 a.m. and you burn it at 11:01 a.m. Okay, now the Abaye libad Rabbi Meir, and according to Abaye's interpretation, according to Rabbi Meir, the Amad en adam to'ev lo kelum, right? That first interpretation is people know the exact time, and there was no margin of error. Nechol kuleshit, so let the person eat the entire 6th hour right up to 11:59, and they'll know to stop. And according to one says, okay, you have to have 2 minutes. Fine, let them stop at 11:58, and they'll still be okay. More questions. According to Rabbi Yehudah, so he says people margin of error is only 30 minutes, so let a person eat till 11:30 a.m. And according to the other opinion, it says a person is off by an hour and a little, so let a person eat till 10:58. Why are you going all the way back till 10 a.m.? Edut misura lezirizim chames lakol masur. The answer is that witnesses are going to be more vigilant. They're going to be more exacting. They're going to, record exactly when it happened. They're going to look carefully and calculate when the hour was. So therefore, we give them a smaller margin of error, maybe even 0. Whereas chametz, everybody has to do it. Has to stop eating chametz, and not everybody is so vigilant and checking exactly what time it is and calculating. So for the masses, we have to add more time, and that's why Rabbi Meir adds 1 hour and Rabbi Yehudah adds 2 hours. All right, that was a good answer for him. And now we're going to ask the other way around. It's some beautifully structured sugya, right? Everything just like fits mathematically once you get the principles here. Right, in Rava's interpretation of Rabbi Meir, he says margin of error, people can't tell the time, and they might be off by up to 2 hours. So then, if people are off after 2 hours, then Rabbi Meir should prohibit chametz from 10:01, but he doesn't. He says 11. Chametz chamesh chama b'mizrach v'sheba chama b'ma'arav. His answer is no. You don't have to add so much time, because when is chametz really prohibited? At noon. At noon, we see the sun at the top of the horizon moving over to the west side of the western hemisphere, and so that is clear. Therefore, you only have to add 1 hour before. Maybe that'll just be 1 hour unclear. You don't have to add 2 hours before, because it's around noontime, and that's a good cutoff. Okay. Hold on. If it's noon, right? If noon's an absolute cutoff, then even according to Rava, let the person eat till 11:58. And because noon, he'll know that then it moves over to the western side. No, even then, when it's all the way up directly above, it's still a little hard to tell if it's exactly over the eastern side or exactly over the western side of the meridian. And so therefore you have to add 1 hour, because people don't know exactly which way straight up. So you add 1 hour, but you don't have to add 2 hours. No one's going to make that kind of mistake. All right, so that's the first answer. It works for the Rabbi Meir. But how about this? How about Rabbi Yehudah? Right, Rabbi's interpretation of Rabbi Yehudah back up regarding testimony was that people are sometimes off up to 3 hours. So so then you should add 3 hours before noon. In other words, stop eating at 9 a.m. But he doesn't say that. He says 10 a.m. So the answer is chamesh chama b'mizrach, sheba chama b'ma'arav. Says no, because it's noon and everybody knows when noon is, so we can cut off an hour. People aren't going to be 3 hours off, and so that's enough. Well, then even they're not going to be 2 hours off either, right? Because noon is a cutoff, so at most they'll be 1 hour off, not two. So this answer does not work for Rava. So we need another one. Okay, we're going to come back to this answer. We're going to say it's a cloudy day, but hold on. Tirgema Abaye aliba de Rava. So all this question was on Rava, but Abaye is his colleague. He jumps in and says, "Hey, I have an answer. I can help you out, Rava." Edut mesura lazirizim hametz lakol masur. Use the same answer that I did, right? And you could say that for edut, everybody is very careful, and so that's why for witnesses they'll be careful and know exactly when noon is. But everybody else, they're not so careful. That's why you have to add 2 more hours. Okay, so that is a possibility there. However, Rava himself has his own answer. He doesn't need Abaye's help. But Rava Amar lav hainu ta'amad Rabbi Yehudah ella Rabbi Yehudah leta'amed Amar en bi'ur chametz ela serefa ve'avu le'Rabanan sha'a achat lilkot ba esim. Oh, you know why? This is not because you're going to be afraid of when it's going to happen. The reason why up here you eat in the 4th and you wait during the 5th hour is to give you a chance to go gather firewood. Right? Because when you're eating, you're busy. And if you will let people continue eating like Rabbi Meir does, they wouldn't get firewood. And then they wouldn't have wood to burn it. Then they're going to start getting firewood during the 6th. It's going to take them time. And then they're going to pass the deadline. So that's why we stop. Nothing to do with the margin of error of time. This is just for firewood. Okay, that's interesting. So that's the answer here. And now going back. Yeah. Okay. However, we reject that answer. Truth is, when do you have to use fire to burn the chametz? Only not the time of its removal. In other words, beforehand, the day before, the morning before, when you have a lot of time. So then it's okay. We may expect you to go and get firewood and build the fire and burn it. But at the time when one needs to burn it, in other words, at that 6th hour, then you got to get rid of it. It's last minute. No playing around here. Get rid of it in any way you can, right? Throw it into the air, throw it into the ocean, destroy it in any way you can, because we can't wait till you do it, till you go and get a fire. And therefore, since we're talking about here the last minute, the last hour, you don't need to get firewood. You can do it in any way. So we have yet another answer. The truth is that we do have to worry about a margin of error, usually 3 hours. But in this case, since it's at noon, we don't have to wait all the way 3 hours. But 1 hour is not enough because it might be a cloudy day. And so on a cloudy day, you need a margin of error of 2 hours. And that's why, according to the Rabbi Yehudah, you need to stop eating 2 hours before. Okay. Wait, even then, if it's very cloudy, you might not even know the difference between the 4th hour and the 5th hour. So stop eating the beginning of the 4th hour. Okay, final answer. No one will mistake the 4th hour because that's breakfast time. And so their circadian rhythm, they knew when they felt they were hungry in the 4th hour because every day they ate during that time. We have breakfast in the morning and then lunch. Typically in those days, they had just 2 meals. One like mid-morning brunch, that would be a big meal, and another meal towards the evening. And so since everyone always eats at that time, no one's going to be at 11 o'clock and think that it's 9 o'clock, because right, they know that eating time is at 9 o'clock. All right, good. Now, so that's the good answer. Now that we mentioned this, we're actually going to ask a question on the papa, and we're going to get to learn the schedules of lots of different professionals. Tanoda banan sha'adi shona ma'achal ludim. Who would eat in the 1st hour of the day? In other words, right at sunrise, the ludim. These were the gladiators. because they have a long day of training ahead of them. They gotta get a breakfast of champions, literally. Also, this might be their last day, so they want to make sure to get breakfast in before they go and fight the lions. So Shiniya Machal Listin, thieves, they're up, they're up late at night, robbing people's houses, and so they go to sleep late. So they wake up late. They eat when they wake up an hour after sunrise. If you eat machal po'alin, day laborers, they're going to go to work first thing, and they gotta get to work. And this after they work for a couple of hours, then they could take a break. So they eat in the fourth hour. Oh, sorry, I missed one. The third hour is machal yorshin, people who have an inheritance, so they don't need to work, so they wake up late. They wake up, 2 hours after sunset, and then they get up and they have nowhere to go, so they eat breakfast early. Workers work for 3 hours, and then they'll have their brunch. Chamishit machal tamidei chachamim. Sages want to have more time to study in the morning. They'll delay till the fifth hour. Shishit machal kol adam. And typical people who are just home farming, sowing, whatever they're doing, they would have it towards the middle of before noon. Okay, that's the typical schedule. Now hold on. This baraita contradicts Rav Papa because he says everybody eats in the fourth hour. Not everybody eats in the fourth hour, only day laborers. So why do you say that? Ela ipuch machal kol adam. So rather, when it says kol adam, switch that around. We have to switch the baraita, and he meant this is actually the fourth hour. Chamishit machal po'alim, day laborers. They have to work a little more time before they can get their brunch because they have, taskmasters they have to answer to. Shishit machal tamidei chachamim, and it's the sages that they need more time to study in the morning, and they delay their brunch the most. All right, so good, we solved that problem. Mikan ve'elach, this is just some good health advice. Kezorek even lachemet. If you don't eat before noon, then any food you have after that is not going to be nourishing. It's like throwing a stone into a leather bottle. It'll raise the water of the wine, but not actually adding more wine. So you're just filling your stomach, but you need the nourishment in the morning. You have to eat at the right time. All right, this is good advice. I just watched a video about the circadian rhythm and talked about how your body needs food in the morning, not at night, right? Any food that you eat at night is just waking your body up and going to give you a bad sleep and make you fat. All right, but morning's okay. So the rabbis knew that too. Okay, Amar Abaye. Says, hold on, this advice is only if you didn't eat anything at all. If you ate something in the morning, then having a meal afternoon is fine. But you just gotta get your gut going in the morning with some food. All right, good. Last couple of notes here. Amar Rav Ashi kemachaloket ba'edut kach machloket bechames. He's giving a general rule that the argument between the Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehudah regarding testimony, that he says it can be 1 hour off or 2 hours off, is parallel to the machloket regarding chametz, whether you have to add 1 hour or 2 hours before noon. Now, that's exactly what we just said, right? This whole page has been matching up these two areas, the area of how much time to add and the area of how the discrepancy between witnesses. So we say, Peshita, Hainu Hachta Amaran, Tamrina, where were you this whole time? That's what we've been talking about, right? We all accepted this. Rav Ashi is late. He's a 6th generation Amora. And we are already talking about Abaye and Rava, our 4th generation. So, we all accepted this already. Rather, what he's coming to tell us is that these answers that we answered are good answers. And don't say that it's a machloket between this Mishnah in Pesachim and the Mishnah in Sanhedrin. Don't think that these are different authors of the Mishnayot and the Mishnayot are contradicting each other because, one gives a longer time, one gives a shorter time. All this exercise that we just did are real good answers. This is really fascinating because it means that sometimes we don't really mean the answers, right? Sometimes we ask a question and we provide answers like we're just trying things out, right? We're going through exercises to see what works, to test out the students, right? But we don't really mean those conclusions. So Rav Ashi here is coming to say that everything we just said, those are the real, true explanations, and you should reconcile both of these mishnayot. Okay, good. Amarav Shimi bar Asher lo shanu ela b'shaot. אבל אחד אומר קודם הנס החמה ואחד אומר אחר הנס החמה עדותן בטלה. Okay, one more point about the testimony is that when we said we accept a testimony an hour apart or 2 hours apart, that's only in the middle of the morning. But if one says it happened before sunrise and one says it happened after sunrise, we reject them because everybody knows exactly when sunrise is, when you can see the disk of the sun. Okay, Peshita. Now, isn't this obvious? Everybody knows this. What are you coming to add, Shimi? What he meant to say is if one says before sunrise and the other one says during sunrise, even then we don't, not after sunrise, but rather during sunrise. Everybody knows that also. Oh, what he's telling us is that we might have thought, since one of them said during sunrise, but really he was seeing rays of light and he thought it was sunrise. But in fact, it was a mistake and it was actually happened before sunrise. So we might think that their testimony is okay, because one said before sunrise, which it was. Other one says during sunrise, and he made a mistake that people can make. So we might have thought that we would accept it, and therefore Rav Shimi comes to tell us, no, sunrise is an absolute, and everybody knows the difference between before, and they're not going to mistake just rays of light for sunrise. That clearly is the next day, and that's a good note to stop here, and we'll continue tomorrow. Baruch Adonai l'olam, amen v'amen.